if he's found guilty, I would like to know that he's behind bars like for a long time. I think it would make a lot of us young women feel safe at home knowing that he's not out and about, like can go into our homes.
I would like something big for it to happen to him. I think it will set an example. It'll definitely put a stamp on what we expect here in this community.
There's something mentally wrong with him, and my personal feeling would be that he would have become a serial killer if he could have, because his crimes kept getting progressively worse.
January 20th, 2008, 9 a.m., Reno, Nevada. A friend rises inside her college rental house, not far from the University of Nevada campus. Dawn pushes through the curtains. She crosses into the living room, fully expecting to find her friend Briana right where she'd left her, curled up on the couch after they'd stumbled home just hours before. The couch sits empty, but Briana's shoes are still there, placed side by side on the floor, her purse, wallet, and ID tucked inside, her cell phone fully charged, her keys. Every single thing she would have needed to step outside that door, still right where she'd set them down. Everything accounted for. Everything except Briana. And there, on the pillow where her head had been, a small dark bloodstain. How do you disappear from inside a house in the dead of night? How does someone remove you from a living room couch without a sound, without a trace, while the people who love you sleep just feet away in the next room? No scream, no struggle loud enough to wake anyone. No sign of forced entry. Just gone. This wasn't an opportunistic break-in. This wasn't some tragic accident. This was a predator who had been hunting, watching, waiting, escalating with every attack. And Brianna Denison, 19 years old, home for winter break from college, sleeping on a friend's couch after a night out, had just become his most brutal victim yet. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in Nevada history. 1,700 volunteers combing 100 square miles, over 2,000 tips flooding police hotlines, an entire community held hostage by dread as a serial rapist moved openly through the streets near a college campus. And when they finally found Briana 26 days later, what the investigation uncovered was something far more disturbing. He'd been practicing, refining his method with each attack, collecting trophies from his victims, and leaving calling cards at each crime scene that would eventually lead investigators straight to his door. To understand what happened to Brianna Denison, you have to understand Reno in January 2008. The final weeks of the Bush presidency, the economy on the brink of collapse. But in Reno, the biggest little city in the world, life felt insulated from all that. This was a college town nestled in the high desert, surrounded by snow-capped mountains, where casinos glittered against the winter sky, and 18,000 students packed the University of Nevada campus. It was Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Winter break was winding down. Students were drifting back for the spring semester, determined to squeeze in one last stretch of concerts and parties before syllabi appeared. Off-campus rentals buzzed with friends piling onto couches, late-night casino runs, and the easy chaos of high school reunions. The kind of weekend where locking the door seemed unnecessary, because you were surrounded by people you trusted. But what no one knew was that a predator had been working that neighborhood for months. 3 sexual assaults since October 2007, all within a single mile of each other. Same DNA left at each scene. Same type of victim. Young women, college-aged, attacked near campus. Same calculated method. Surprise, overwhelming force, and trophies taken from each victim. Police had connected the attacks through DNA evidence. They'd released a sketch. They were hunting him, but they hadn't caught him yet. And on January 20th, 2008, he escalated. The unlocked door at 1395 My Court wasn't negligence. It was college life. It was normalcy. It was the quiet assumption that evil doesn't slip through unlocked doors at 4 in the morning while your friends sleep in the next room. But it does. Brianna Denison was born on March 29, 1988 in Reno, Nevada. Sierra Nevada through and through. She came up inside a warm, tightly bonded family. Her mother, Bridget Denison, would later call Brianna her best friend. She had a younger brother, Brighton, whom she guarded with fierce devotion. Their childhood was stitched together from the memories that make Reno feel like home. Snow days, family ski trips to Lake Tahoe, long golden summers near the water. Briana graduated from Reno High School in June 2006. She was an honor student, a cheerleader, the kind of kid people were drawn to without quite knowing why. Vibrant, outgoing, magnetic. When Briana walked into a room, you felt it. After high school, she enrolled at Santa Barbara City College in California, studying psychology. She wanted to help people, to understand how the mind works, to make a difference in the world. Santa Barbara was her grand leap forward, her shot at a life beyond Reno, a chance to discover herself and step into the woman she was becoming. But she never let go of home. She returned every break, reconnecting with the friends who'd known her long before college, long before California. At 19, Briana stood on the edge of everything. Long brown hair, bright smile, the kind of person who made everyone around her feel truly seen. Her friends described her as loyal, the one who showed up, who actually listened, who was there when things fell apart. She was fun-loving but responsible, holding her studies and her social life in easy balance. She never gave her parents reason to worry. She had a serious boyfriend back in Santa Barbara. They texted constantly, mapped out their future together. She loved music, loved dancing, loved being surrounded by her people. Her friends called her the glue, the one who held the whole group together. In January 2008, Briana came home to Reno for Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. It was tradition. She'd attended the same MLK weekend events the year before. Concerts, parties, a chance to see everyone before the spring semester started. Her plans were straightforward. Stay with her parents, catch up with high school friends, breathe in the familiar, then return to Santa Barbara recharged. January 19th, 2008 was supposed to be just another fun night. Briana and her friends went to a concert, then made their writ to the Sands Regency Casino on North Arlington Avenue, a popular late-night destination for the college crowd. Among the group was her close friend Katie Hunter, who lived in an off-campus rental house on My Court, just blocks from the University of Nevada campus. They stayed out late, laughing, dancing, living exactly the kind of night you're supposed to have when you're 19 and back home with your people. Around 4 in the morning on January 20th, Briana and KT headed back to KT's house. Briana was too worn out to make the drive all the way back to her parents' place across town, so she decided to crash on the couch. She'd done it countless times before. The house was a standard college rental with a back door fitted with a glass panel. Like most nights, it was unlocked. Before drifting off, Briana texted her boyfriend goodnight, told him she loved him. Then she settled onto the couch in the living room, drew a blanket up around herself, and laid her head on a pillow. She was wearing gray sweatpants, a white tank top, and bright orange socks, neon, impossible to miss. Her shoes sat neatly on the floor, her phone on the table, her purse nearby. She fell asleep, feeling safe. Her mother knew she was at KT's house and wasn't worried. Briana was responsible. She always checked in. She had no reason to believe January 20th, 2008 would be anything other than another ordinary morning after a good night out with friends. She didn't know that someone had been studying the neighborhood, that her unlocked door was an open invitation, that the couch she fell asleep on would be the last place her friends ever saw her alive. Sometime between 4:30 and 9 that morning, a man entered the house at 1395 My Court. The back door, still unlocked from the night before, offered him easy passage. Inside, multiple people were sleeping, completely unaware. And Briana lay alone on the couch in the living room, vulnerable and visible. He moved silently. No forced entry, no broken glass, no noise. He located Briana on the couch and acted without hesitation. Investigators believe he drove her face into the pillow to smother any sound. The bite marks pressed deep into that fabric tell the story of desperation, of someone fighting for breath, unable to scream. There was a struggle, but it was contained, controlled. He'd done this before. A small blood stain on the pillow stood as evidence of violence, of impact, of sheer terror. Touch DNA recovered from the rear doorknob confirmed he'd been there. His hand on that handle, turning it, stepping through without a second thought. He either knew the layout already or had scouted it in advance, emboldened by each prior success in the neighborhood. He took her in the dead of night, in a house full of people, and no one heard a thing. Not a scream, not a crash, not footsteps. What he left behind was everything she would have needed to survive a freezing January night in Reno. Temperatures in the 20s, snow covering the ground. He carried her out exactly as she'd been sleeping. No protection from the elements, no way to call for help. At 9, KT Hunter woke up and crossed into the living room, expecting to find Briana still stretched out on the couch. The couch was empty. The pillow bore a dark stain, bite marks pressed into the fabric, everything else untouched. KT was frantic. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. My friend spent the night last night on my couch. She's gone, and there's something that looks like blood on the pillow. The dispatcher asked whether Briana could have left on her own. KT was clear. No shoes, no phone, no purse, no coat, and it was freezing outside. I need the police at my house. Reno police arrived within minutes. They saw the blood, the pillow, the unlocked door. Detective Dave Jenkins would later say it was pretty apparent that this was not a voluntary missing person. They tested the blood. It was Briana's. They swabbed the doorknob, unknown male DNA. They ran that DNA through the system, and then came the gut punch revelation. The DNA matched 2 prior sexual assaults in the same neighborhood. One in November 2007, another in December. Both victims were young women, college-aged, attacked near the UNR campus. Both had survived and reported their attacks to police. Now, the same offender had escalated from rape to abduction, and Brianna Denison was in his hands. To understand what happened to Briana, you need to know about the women who came before her. October 22, 2007, a UNR student was walking to her car in a campus parking garage right next to the campus police station. She was seized from behind, a gun pressed to her head. Her attacker raped her in the garage, then vanished. He ordered her not to look at his face. He took her underwear, a trophy, a ritual, the earliest signature of something deeply calculated. She was terrified, traumatized, but she reported the attack without delay. She gave police a precise description. White male, thick, meaty fingers, spoke English with no accent, strong build. She worked with a sketch artist to produce a composite. That sketch would later become crucial. November 13, 2007, another UNR student, a parking lot near campus, seized from behind, sexually assaulted. Same pattern. He kept her underwear. DNA was collected from the scene. The victim's description matched the October attack. December 16, 2007. A 22-year-old foreign exchange student walking near campus. He clamped his hand over her mouth. She lost consciousness. When she came to, she was inside a vehicle, a 2005 to 2006 Toyota Tacoma extended cab pickup truck. He raped her in that truck, then dropped her off and commanded her not to look at his face. He kept her underwear, but she was able to describe the truck in precise detail. That description would become a key piece of evidence. DNA was collected from her rape kit.
As she got out of his truck here in this neighborhood, the attacker threatened to kill her if she told anyone. And sure enough, he tried to make good on that threat. A few weeks later, he came back and tried to break into her home. Lucky for her, he never got inside. For just 24 hours later, and only a couple blocks away from here, Brianna Denison would become his next victim.
3 attacks in 3 months, all within a mile of each other, all near the UNR campus, all targeting young women. Same method, surprise attack, overpowering force, underwear taken as a trophy. DNA linked all 3 cases. Police knew they had a serial rapist working the area. They released the sketch based on the October victim's description. They released the truck description from the December victim. But they had no name, no suspect. Then came Briana, and everything changed. He went from attacking women in parking lots to breaching a home. He went from rape to abduction. He went from leaving victims alive to what investigators feared most: murder.
She is one of the nicest girls, and if whoever did this is watching, just, she's so nice, just please pay her back. She wasn't there, and I noticed blood on the pillow, so we called the cops, and from there it's just been the nightmare.
Brianna's mother, Bridget, got the call from KT that morning. Briana is gone. Bridget knew immediately. That can't be good. She raced to my court and arrived to find it swarming with police. The reality closed in fast. Her daughter had been taken. Within 24 hours, the story was everywhere, local news, national news. The FBI joined the investigation, and the community of Reno responded in a way rarely witnessed. The volunteer army that assembled, neighbors, students, complete strangers, swept through fields, dumpsters, abandoned buildings, and riverbanks across the region. Blue ribbons appeared on every car antenna, every mailbox, every telephone pole. Brianna's color, Brianna's symbol. Vigils were held at Reno High School and at the Lawler Event Center. Nevada's First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, personally joined the search. A website was launched, Briana.com, to coordinate tips, post updates, and keep hope breathing. Bridget held on to that hope. She would later say, "All through the process, I pretty much had hope that we would find her. What else do you do?" The family held on to the fact that the December victim had been released alive. Maybe Briana would be too. They waited for ransom calls, for sightings, for anything. Brianna's boyfriend back in Santa Barbara was shattered. Their final conversation now replaying on a loop. The investigation pressed harder. Reno PD, the FBI, UNR Police, Washoe County Sheriff, all resources committed. Over 2,000 tips poured into hotlines. Police worked through nearly 100 registered sex offenders living within a mile of my court. The composite sketch was posted everywhere, a white male, strong build, distinctive features. The suspect vehicle description was broadcast on a constant rotation, but there were no arrests. On February 2, 2008, America's Most Wanted featured Brianna's case. CNN, Fox News, ABC, CBS, the national media descended on Reno. The pressure was crushing. Find her, bring her home. Stop this monster. But as days bled into weeks, temperatures dropped and snow kept falling, hope began to fracture. Investigators privately feared the worst, but said nothing publicly. Everyone understood the unspoken truth. The longer she was missing, the less likely she was coming home alive. February 15, 2008, 26 days after Brianna vanished, Albert Jimenez, an employee at EE Technologies in South Reno, was heading back from his lunch break at Subway. He cut through an empty field in an industrial park roughly 8 miles from my court when something stopped him cold. Bright orange fabric, half buried among discarded tree limbs and brush in a roadside ditch. He moved closer. The orange was neon, artificial, jarring against the dead winter vegetation. Socks. Bright orange socks. Attached to feet. At first he thought it was a mannequin. It didn't look real. Then he saw the wound on the shoulder, the exposed skin, the stillness. It was a body. A woman's body. Jimenez didn't have a cell phone. He sprinted back to EE Technologies and called 911. Reno police arrived within minutes. The body was partially concealed beneath a discarded Christmas tree, partially blanketed by snow. She had been wearing only those neon orange socks, nothing else. The body had been there for more than a week, possibly since shortly after the abduction. Heavy snowfall had kept her hidden. Dental records confirmed what everyone had been dreading. It was Brianna Denison. The autopsy conducted on February 16th revealed she had been strangled with a pair of thong panties. Pink, not hers. There was evidence of sexual assault. 2 pairs of thong underwear were found intertwined with her body. The pink pair with elastic bands had been used to strangle her. The black pair, decorated with Pink Panther emblems, belonged to an unknown victim. Neither pair was Brianna's. Investigators believe the panties were trophies from previous victims, left as a calling card, a deliberate taunt directed at law enforcement. Bridget Zunino Denison's worst nightmare was confirmed. 26 days of hope, shattered in an instant. The community buckled. Blue ribbons that had once stood for survival now carried the weight of grief. On February 23rd, hundreds gathered at a vigil in Reno to remember Brianna.
We've got to take on some urgent business in Reno, Nevada. Cops need your help to hunt down the killer of 19-year-old Brianna Denison, a cold-hearted predator whose crimes have escalated from molestation to rape and finally to murder.
He is believed to be white and in his early 30s with a square chin and short goatee or beard. He is also believed to be between...
After Brianna's body was discovered, the urgency reached a new pitch. Reno Police Deputy Chief Jim Johns told reporters, "I would say this is a serial rapist. We have 2, probably 3 cases linked through DNA. I'm worried this guy is still out there, and I'm worried somebody else is going to get hurt." UNR Police Chief Adam Garcia called the suspect an animal. The entire city operated under a cloud of fear. Parents pulled their daughters from UNR. Gun sales skyrocketed. women armed themselves with pepper spray and stun guns. The campus, normally alive with student energy, felt abandoned after dark. Investigators were sitting on mountains of evidence. DNA from the doorknob at my court, DNA from Brianna's body, DNA from the 2 pairs of underwear recovered at the scene, DNA from the 3 prior sexual assault cases. Every sample pointed to the same source, same offender. They had the composite sketch from the October victim. They had the vehicle description from the December victim. But they kept hitting walls. Tips continued flooding in. Neighbors calling with suspicions, students offering theories, witnesses reporting possible sightings. More than 700 men had voluntarily submitted DNA samples, desperate to eliminate themselves from suspicion. None matched. Registered sex offenders had been interviewed and cleared. Detectives pushed through sleepless nights chasing leads that dissolved into nothing, pursuing shadows that never solidified. The killer was careful, smart, organized. And then there were those panties. The calling card left at Brianna's crime scene. Black thong underwear decorated with Pink Panther emblems, belonging to an unknown victim. Police made a desperate public appeal. If you recognize these, come forward. Someone had to know something. Someone out there had seen him in possession of women's underwear that wasn't theirs. Someone had registered strange behavior, unexplained absences, a vehicle that fit the description, a feeling that something wasn't right. Someone had their suspicions, and 10 months later, someone finally made the call. November 1st, 2008, 10 months after Brianna's murder, an anonymous call came into the secret witness tip line. A woman reported that her friend, the girlfriend of a man named James Biela, had discovered women's underwear inside his truck. Thong panties, 2 pairs, not hers. She had confronted him. He had no explanation. The tipster added critical details. Biela drove a vehicle matching the description from the December assault. He'd worked construction jobs in the area, and he'd left Reno in a hurry in March 2008, right after Brianna's body was found. Detectives interviewed James Michael Biela, 27, from Sparks, Nevada. He worked as a pipe fitter. They requested a voluntary DNA sample. He refused. He claimed he was with his girlfriend the night Brianna disappeared. His girlfriend later denied this to police, but she did cooperate in another way. She gave detectives permission to collect a DNA sample from their 4-year-old son. Biela was the father. Lab results confirmed that the boy's direct biological relative could not be ruled out as the source of DNA recovered from the crime scenes. Biela was the match.
Did you do this? Oh my God, did you? Did you? I don't know if I should hit you or hug you. Did you shoot me? Did you look me in the face? Did you? Did you?
No, it's not the time. Well, I don't know what the time is. I can't right now.
If you didn't do it, I will fight to prove your innocence.
But what? DNA? That's what the does it matter? Did you get an attorney? Oh yeah, that'll work. That's gonna work out.
I can't tell me anything.
Doesn't matter.
It does matter
It
to me.
doesn't matter.
It matters to me.
And if I told you I did it, you'd still love me and be with me.
On November 25, 2008, police arrested him as he dropped his son off at a Reno daycare center. They obtained a direct DNA sample. Overnight testing at the crime lab confirmed it. They had him. So who was James Michael Biela? Former U.S. Marine, honorably discharged. He had served his country, absorbed its discipline, learned how to fight. He was trained in martial arts, knew how to overpower someone quickly, efficiently, silently. After the military, he worked as a pipe fitter in construction. In 2007, he took a job on the University of Nevada, Reno campus. That job handed him everything he needed: intimate knowledge of the area, daily access to observe student patterns, routines, vulnerabilities. He learned when women walked alone, where the lighting was poor, which routes were isolated. He was hunting. To everyone around him, he appeared completely ordinary. He lived with his girlfriend in Sparks. They had a young son together. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable. Nobody suspected the man next door was a serial rapist. But the signs had been there. In 2001, he'd been arrested for threatening a former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. a history of violence toward women, a warning that nobody acted on. He had a ritual, a compulsion. He kept underwear from his victims, trophies to revisit the attacks, to preserve a sense of dominance long after they were over. And he deposited them at crime scenes as calling cards, taunting investigators, daring them to close the distance. When Brianna's body was found in February 2008 and the media circulated the composite sketch and truck description, Biela understood the walls were closing in. In March, he slipped out of Reno to Washington State under the cover of a construction job. Along the way, he offloaded his Toyota Tacoma in Kellogg, Idaho, an attempt to bury the evidence. But he had already left far too much behind. DNA at 4 crime scenes, witnesses who had seen his face, his truck. The carefully constructed mask he'd worn for years was about to shatter.
Neighbors say they rarely, if ever, saw Biela, and it's really the same story from his father, who says it's been a year or so since he saw his son Jimmy. Be warned, you may find some of the father's language offensive.
Joe Biela had a handful of family photos to share with us, and after learning of the arrest, he gets pretty heated when he sees his son James.
Jimmy, that's the little asswipe that killed that girl. Too bad, but he did.
Biela says he and his son were not close. Joe knows that James was a plumber, but not much else about his son's life.
Is that his kid he's holding?
Hell if I know.
Father and son are both ex-Marines. Joe has his honorable discharge on the wall, but says his son, seen here in uniform, was kicked out.
Yeah, for doing drugs. I do drugs too. You name it, I done it. But I don't get caught.
James Biela's trial began in May 2010, more than 2 years after Brianna's murder. The prosecution, led by Washoe County District Attorney Dick Gammick, laid out overwhelming evidence. The DNA that had first pointed investigators toward Biela, drawn from his 4-year-old son, had unlocked the door to matching him directly to every crime scene.
Prosecutors called Biela's former supervisor, John Latham. Latham said on February 15, 2008, after Brianna Denison's body was found that same morning, Biela quit his job, took his last paycheck, and moved to Washington State. Also that same day, Latham talked with Biela about the discovery of the body.
I asked him how he felt about her being found, and his comment is that she...
And I know there was some colorful language. Say exactly what he said.
The bitch probably had it coming.
Then he says Biela cracked a smile.
And we've heard testimony that the defendant kind of fancied himself a bit of a comedian. He was a funny guy. So the bitch probably had it coming might be a very poor attempt at humor from anybody other than the person who strangled the life out of Brianna Denison. You could probably apply that to all 3 victims in this case. He probably figures that all 3 of them had it coming.
The 2 surviving victims took the stand. They identified Biela. They walked the jury through their attacks in painful detail. They looked him in the eye.
We show you some pictures here from court earlier. Biela, watching as the chief investigator, testified about flying to Taiwan to interview the 22-year-old victim of that December rape, who testified yesterday. The detective said that because he learned of a genetic link between her case and Brianna Denison, and the victim was very cooperative.
She felt a moral obligation to cooperate in the hopes that this person could be caught and not hurt anyone else.
Detective Jenkins is talking about the rape victim who was the first person to testify in this case. Because she's the victim of an alleged rape, we've concealed her identity. There is another rape prosecutors charged Biela with committing. We've not yet heard from that victim, though the detective did describe her as much more reluctant to come forward. Prosecutors say that rape occurred at gunpoint in a parking garage on UNR campus in October 2007.
Biela sat emotionless throughout the trial, fixed on the defense table, revealing nothing. His attorneys argued he had endured a brutal childhood, raised under the shadow of an alcoholic father who routinely beat his mother. They contended he had functioned as a productive member of society before his crimes unraveled. They appealed to the jury to spare his life. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. On May 27, 2010, they returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Brianna Denison, kidnapping, sexual assault. 2 additional counts of sexual assault and kidnapping for the attacks on the other women. Brianna's family sat in the courtroom, tears moving freely down their faces, relief and a grief that would never fully close, pressed together in the same breath. The prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that Biela was a serial predator and an enduring threat to every woman within reach. The jury agreed. They dismissed the defense's mitigating factors without concession. On July 30th, 2010, Judge Robert Perry sentenced James Biela to death for Brianna's murder. He also imposed 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the remaining attacks. Justice for Briana. Justice for every one of his victims. Biela remains on Nevada's death row. He has pursued multiple appeals, all denied. Most recently in June 2019, when the Nevada Supreme Court ruled that his arguments do not warrant relief. In the aftermath of Brianna's murder, Nevada passed legislation in her honor, Brianna's Law. The statute requires that anyone arrested for a felony in Nevada must submit a DNA sample. Since its passage, Brianna's Law has matched over 1,000 DNA samples to crimes, cracking cold cases, flagging serial offenders, and interrupting cycles of violence before they could claim new victims. Her death became a mechanism that has saved lives. Brianna Denison had her entire life stretched out ahead of her, a young woman pursuing psychology because she genuinely wanted to help people. A daughter, a sister, a friend, a girlfriend, taken from a couch while her friends slept in the next room. She deserved to grow old, to finish college, to fall in love, to leave her mark on the world she cared so deeply about. Instead, she became a catalyst for change. Her family has pushed tirelessly to make certain she is remembered, not as a victim, not as a case number, but as Briana. Vibrant, loving, unforgettable. The girl who changed the atmosphere of every room she stepped into. January 20th, 2008. It should have been just another slow morning after a good night with friends. But evil doesn't request entry. It doesn't pause for the right moment. It moves through unlocked doors while decent people sleep. Brianna's story is a reminder that monsters don't always keep to the shadows. Sometimes they work construction. Sometimes they raise children. Sometimes they live next door. And sometimes it takes a single anonymous phone call, one person willing to speak, to finally pull them into the light. If this story moved you, consider joining our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep telling the stories we believe deserve to be heard.